The old, pitted asphalt of the highway eventually gave way to a gravel track, then a barely discernible path choked with ferns and moss. My SUV, usually so confident on city streets, grumbled its protest, branches scraping against its sides like skeletal fingers. The air grew thick, damp, and cool, tasting of pine needles and wet earth. This was it. The edge of the world, or at least the edge of my known one. Blackwood Manor. I hadn't seen my great-aunt Elara in person since I was a kid, maybe 10. Her letters, when they came, were always sealed with wax and smelled faintly of dried leaves, filled with meticulous descriptions of new botanical specimens and cryptic remarks about the deep roots of the estate. Now he was gone, a mystery even to the local authorities, who'd simply labeled her passing as natural causes, likely a fall. The solicitor had been brusque, efficient. "Blake, you're the sole heir. It's all yours. The house, the land, the gardens." He'd paused then, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before pushing the heavy key into my palm. I pulled the SUV to a halt, the engine sighing into silence. Before me, Blackwood Manor rose from the mist-shrouded landscape like a forgotten titan. It was less a house, and more a sprawling Gothic behemoth, built from dark, weather-beaten stone that seemed to absorb the meager light. Turrets, gables, and chimneys clawed at the perpetually overcast sky. Ivy, thick as my arm, wrestled with the walls, claiming windows and snaking around the massive oak front door. The gardens, or what remained of them, were a wild, untamed wilderness. A testament to Elara's reclusive nature and her particular passion. Twisted rhododendrons, towering hemlocks, and what looked like a dozen species of aggressively invasive vines formed an impenetrable green wall, pressing in on the house as if trying to reclaim it. This wasn't the escape I'd envisioned. This felt like walking into a trap, or maybe a waiting maw. Still, I gripped the heavy iron key. A fresh start. That's what I told myself. A chance to outrun the echoes of my own tragedy, to bury myself in something new, something vast enough to swallow my grief. The massive oak door groaned open with a sound like an old man clearing his throat, exhaling an odor of dust, damp stone, and something vaguely floral, but not in a pleasant way. More like decaying petals and forgotten potpourri. A sweeping staircase, its banister carved with intricate, unsettling patterns of vines and leaves, dominated the space. Light struggled to penetrate the grime-streaked stained glass windows, casting dim, fractured colors onto the flagstone floor. Dust motes danced in the anemic shafts of light, ancient and undisturbed. I tried a light switch, but nothing happened. Of course, power had likely been off for weeks, maybe months. I pulled out my phone, its flashlight beam a pathetic spear against the gloom. The air was heavy, still, as if the house itself held its breath. I started my exploration methodically, moving from room to room on the ground floor. The library was vast, lined with shelves overflowing with leather-bound tomes, many of them on botany, some with titles written in languages I didn't recognize. Dried plant specimens, pressed flat and brittle, lay scattered on a mahogany desk alongside magnifying glasses and delicate tarnished tools. Everything here was built to last, to endure, to outlive its occupants. The kitchen was a relic, a vast space with an old cast-iron stove and a pantry that smelled faintly of spices and something else. Something earthy and a little sweet, like overripe fruit. It wasn't the wind, nor the creaking of old timbers. It was mechanical, steady. Curiosity, a dangerous thing in a house like this, tugged me forward. The hum grew louder, a low thrumming that resonated in my chest. I pushed open a heavy wooden door, unmarked and unassuming. Inside, bathed in the soft, fluorescent glow of a single flickering overhead bulb, was a laundry room with humming machines. 2 industrial-sized washing machines and a dryer, all gleaming chrome and polished steel, were running. Water sloshed, agitator spun, and the dryer tumbled with a steady, hypnotic rhythm. My breath hitched. How? The power was supposed to be off. Who had been here? And what were they washing? I moved closer, my flashlight beam cutting through the steam. The dryer, though, held a single item. A thick, earth-stained canvas work apron, stitched with pockets and loops for tools, and embroidered with a peculiar stylized green vine. Elara's. I stood there, the rhythmic thrumming of the machines filling the space, the clean, damp smell mixing with the strange green scent. It wasn't just that the house was alive. It was that something in it was still actively tending to things, still maintaining a routine. And I was quite sure I wasn't alone. My escape suddenly felt less like a fresh start and more like an unwelcome intrusion. Finally, the path opened into a wide, overgrown clearing, and there it stood. Blackwood Manor. It wasn't just a house. It was a hulking, skeletal presence, draped in shadow even in the late afternoon. Gnarled, ivy-choked trees clawed at its slate roof, their branches like arthritic fingers. The windows, dark and numerous, stared out like vacant eyes. I killed the engine. It wasn't unpleasant, not exactly, but it was wrong. It clung to the air, a sticky, unwelcome perfume. I pushed. Surprisingly, it swung inward with a groan that seemed to reverberate through the very foundations of the house. No lock, no resistance. Just an invitation. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and the unmistakable scent of forgotten things. My footsteps echoed, each one swallowed by the vast emptiness. This place was immense. The parlor was a mausoleum of draped furniture, the library shelves groaning under the weight of ancient leather-bound tomes. Elara had lived here alone for decades. I found a relatively clear bedroom upstairs, one with a decent view of the overgrown grounds. It felt less suffocating than the others, though the wallpaper peeled in places like sun-scorched skin. I dropped my duffel bag, the thud echoing down the hall. My plan was simple. Unpack a few essentials, get some sleep, and tackle the rest in the morning. A fresh start, remember? But the house had other plans. When I turned my head, there was nothing. Then came the sounds, not the expected creaks and groans of an old house settling. These were different. At first, I dismissed them as the wind, a trick of the old timbers. But they were too regular, too rhythmic. A low, sibilant murmur, just beneath the threshold of understanding, like 1,000 hushed conversations happening just out of earshot. I needed a distraction, something mundane. I realized I hadn't brought fresh sheets, and the ones on the bed were brittle with age. I remembered passing a utility room downstairs. Maybe there was a spare set, or at least a washing machine. Navigating the labyrinthine hallways in the dim light, guided only by the meager beam of my phone, I finally located a door that led to the back of the house. Beyond it, a faint, rhythmic thrumming vibrated through the floorboards. I found myself in a sprawling laundry room with humming machines. 2 industrial-sized washers and dryers stood against one wall, their metal bodies cool to the touch. The low, insistent hum wasn't coming from them, though. It seemed to emanate from the very foundations of the room, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated up through my feet. It was almost hypnotic, a constant, low-frequency pulse. The air in here was even heavier, saturated with that strange, sweet, metallic scent. Hers. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't the wind. It was deliberate. Overwhelmed, I needed to get out. As I turned, my gaze snagged on a tall, narrow archway I hadn't noticed before, tucked away behind a stack of forgotten cleaning supplies. They pulsed faintly, a subtle, almost imperceptible undulation, like slow-breathing capillaries. Curiosity, a dangerous instinct, tugged at me. I pushed aside the heavy, woody tendrils. The air beyond was warmer, humid, and the strange, sweet scent was overpowering now, almost suffocating. My phone's light cut through the gloom, revealing a vast, soaring space, far larger than the manor's exterior suggested. This was Elara's conservatory. It was a cathedral of glass and green, but a terrifying one. Plants, monstrous and alien, filled every inch, reaching for the unseen sky. Some had fleshy, bulbous growths that seemed to weep of viscous amber sap. Others bore strange, bell-shaped flowers that glowed with a faint internal luminescence, casting eerie, shifting patterns on the walls. They coiled around me, slithering into my ears, brushing against my skin like invisible threads. This wasn't just a garden. This was a living, breathing, festering thing, and it felt like it had been waiting. For me, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the encroaching dread. This wasn't just a garden. This was a living, breathing, festering thing. It clung to my clothes, seeped into my skin. The strange, pulsing tendrils I'd glimpsed in the twilight now seemed to beckon, their tips almost shimmering in the fading light. The entrance was obscured by a cascade of thick, ropey vines, their leaves a deep, bruised purple. The air hit me like a physical wall. Humid, hot, and dense. It was a stark contrast to the cool, damp Pacific Northwest evening outside. The glass panes, many cracked and webbed with grime, filtered the last vestiges of daylight into a sickly emerald glow. This wasn't a conservatory. It was a jungle. A monstrous, sprawling ecosystem of plants I'd never seen before, and certainly not native to this region. They writhed and intertwined, their forms grotesque and alien. Bulbous growths, slick with a glistening film, clung to the ceiling. Some plants bore blossoms of impossible colors. Deep indigo, phosphorescent green, and a disturbing, fleshy pink that pulsed faintly. It was the plants themselves, shifting, breathing. A low, persistent hum vibrated through the floorboards, a sound I recognize now as coming from the laundry room with humming machines somewhere below or nearby, a mundane anchor in this surreal landscape. It was a comfort, a whisper of the ordinary world, but it felt impossibly distant here. I moved deeper, navigating a treacherous path overgrown with thorny vines that seemed to retract slightly as I approached, then slowly extend again behind me. The heat was stifling, sweat beading on my forehead and trickling down my spine. The strange, sweet scent was overpowering now, almost intoxicating. It made my head feel light, my thoughts hazy at the edges. I ran a hand over a nearby leaf. It was surprisingly soft, almost velvety. But beneath the surface, I felt a network of rigid, almost bone-like veins. In the center of this botanical nightmare, beneath a massive tree-like structure whose trunk was a twisted mass of bark and pulsing tendrils, I found a small, overturned potting bench. Dust motes danced in the sparse light, illuminated by a beam that pierced a gap in the overhead foliage. Tucked underneath, almost swallowed by a creeping moss, was a small, leather-bound box. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. It wasn't locked. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried leaves, were several journals. Elara's, I presumed. They were thick, their covers worn smooth from handling. The first one, dated years ago, began innocently enough. Precise sketches of flora, Latin names, observations about soil and light. Her handwriting was neat, academic. The handwriting was less orderly now, more frantic. Lines were underlined multiple times, margins filled with hastily scribbled notes. October 17th. The growth accelerates. Its hunger is insatiable. I fear what it demands next. I swallowed hard, the air suddenly thick and difficult to draw into my lungs. What was she talking about? Another entry, further in, the root. It is not merely a plant. It is aware. It speaks to me, not with words, but with a yearning. A deep, resonant pulse that echoes in my very bones. My eyes darted around the conservatory. The rustling seemed to intensify. Was it my imagination? Or were the nearest tendrils actually shifting, turning their strange, flower-like mouths towards me? They call it madness. But how can they deny its vitality? Its beauty? It offers connection. A different kind of life. A different kind of life. Elara hadn't just been tending a garden. She'd been cultivating a relationship, a symbiotic bond with something that clearly wasn't from this world, at least not in any conventional sense. The plants around me, the whole manor, felt like an extension of this root. The final journal, almost falling apart, had only a few entries. The last one was dated a week before her death. The handwriting was barely legible, a wild scrawl of desperation and euphoria. December 1st. It spreads, it grows, it consumes. And I am part of it now. My purpose is clear: to nourish, to protect, to ensure the new host is ready. The growth awaits. Blake. My name. The journal slipped from my numb fingers, thudding softly onto the damp earth. The humid air suddenly felt suffocating. The plants, their strange blossoms, their twisting forms, they were no longer just exotic flora. They were limbs, organs, a vast interconnected nervous system. And the entire manor, the whole estate, was its body. The rustling intensified, a collective sigh from the surrounding vegetation. A tendril, thicker than the others, uncoiled from the central tree and extended slowly, almost tentatively, towards me. It wasn't just waiting. It knew I was here. And it knew my name. My name. My breath hitched, a ragged, useless sound in the heavy air. The journal, a relic of Elara's peculiar obsession, slipped from my numb fingers, thudding softly onto the damp earth. They were limbs, organs, a vast interconnected nervous system. And I was in it. I scrambled back, stumbling away from the fallen journal, away from the encroaching tendrils of green that seemed to lean closer, to watch me. My boots churned the mud as I retreated to the relative safety of the manor's back door, fumbling with the heavy iron handle. Inside, the air was still and cool, carrying the faint, familiar scent of dust and old wood. I leaned against the heavy oak, my chest heaving, trying to force oxygen into my starved lungs. "It's just a coincidence," I muttered, the words sounding hollow and unconvincing even to me. Elara knew me. I pushed off the door, trying to regain some semblance of control. I needed a drink, something strong, or maybe just a moment of quiet to think. As I reached for a glass on the open shelf, a small silver-framed photograph, one I'd placed there just yesterday, slid forward, teetering on the edge. I watched, mesmerized, as it slowly, deliberately toppled over, landing face down on the counter with a soft clatter. I stared at it. There was no breeze, no vibration. It had simply moved. My heart gave a frantic thump. "All right, Blake, you're tired," I whispered, bending to pick it up. My reflection stared back from the glass of the frame, pale and wide-eyed. Then it snapped back to normal. My own terrified face. I dropped the photograph, the clatter echoing too loudly in the stillness. It was a sense of being observed, not by an animal or a person, but by the very fabric of the house itself. Anyone. A colleague from the city, a distant cousin, the estate lawyer. Just a human voice, a connection to the world outside these walls. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling. No signal. I tried again, moving to different windows, even stepping out onto the small, enclosed porch. Nothing. Not a single bar. The phone was dead, a useless brick in my hand. Panic began to claw its way up my throat. I remembered the old landline in the study, a rotary phone Elara had apparently insisted on keeping. Desperate, I hurried through the labyrinthine corridors, the feeling of being watched intensifying with every step. The air felt heavy, stagnant, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I reached the study, the room smelling of aged paper and dried herbs. The rotary phone sat on the dusty desk, a quaint anachronism. I lifted the receiver. Dead. Utterly, completely dead. Not even a faint hum. My mind raced, searching for a rational explanation. A power outage? But the lights were still working. A cut line? But the internet, if it ever worked here, was also gone. It felt deliberate, as if the house, or whatever was rooted within it, was actively severing my ties to the outside world. A sudden, insistent urge to clean the mud from my boots, from my clothes, from the lingering grime of the garden, took hold. A mundane task, something normal, to ground myself. The descent down the narrow, unlit staircase felt like entering the house's gullet. The laundry room itself was a small, windowless chamber. 2 ancient washing machines and a dryer stood like silent sentinels, their industrial gray forms stark against the peeling paint of the walls. I flipped a switch, and the overhead fluorescent light flickered to life, casting a harsh, buzzing glow. I stripped off my muddy shirt, tossing it into one of the washers. As I straightened, my eyes fell on the opposite wall. It wasn't water. It was a deep, earthy brown, almost black, and it looked organic, like a bruise spreading on ancient skin. And as I watched, transfixed, a tiny, almost imperceptible tendril, no thicker than a thread, seemed to stretch from the stain, creeping slowly, painstakingly, across the surface of the wall, reaching towards the humming machines, towards me. The house wasn't just watching me. It was closing in. And I was completely, utterly alone. I jolted upright, gasping, my head cracking against the headboard. The sound echoed in the sudden silence of my bedroom. It wasn't the first time I'd woken like this. Lately, sleep had become a battlefield, a place where the manor's secrets clawed their way into my subconscious. This time, the dream had been particularly vivid. Tendrils, impossibly long and sinuous, writhed around me, their surfaces slick and cool against my skin. They weren't choking me, not exactly, but they were holding me, a gentle yet inescapable embrace. I could feel them, a network of roots extending deep into the earth beneath me and even deeper into my own flesh. Indistinct, yet undeniably there, just at the edge of comprehension, promising something ancient and hungry. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the rough wool of the rug a grounding sensation beneath my bare feet. The room was still dim, the pre-dawn light barely filtering through the heavy curtains. I scrubbed a hand over my face, trying to erase the phantom sensations of the dream. A flicker at the edge of my vision, a verdant green, like the unnatural glow of the conservatory plants, seemed to shimmer for a split second on the faded wallpaper. I blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the familiar floral pattern. Just fatigue, I told myself, the lingering tendrils of a bad dream. I needed coffee. The manor felt different in these early hours before the sun fully asserted itself. It wasn't just quiet, it was listening. Every creak of the old timbers, every rustle of the wind outside, seemed amplified, imbued with a subtle malevolence. My own footsteps felt too loud, an intrusion. The rhythmic thrumming of the washing machine and the gentle tumble of the dryer were, ironically, a small comfort. As I reached for a discarded sheet, something caught my eye. Tucked into a fold of fabric, a tiny, almost imperceptible speck. It glowed. Not brightly, not like a firefly, but with a soft, internal luminescence. A faint, pulsing green that seemed to draw the light into itself rather than reflect it. It was small, no bigger than a grain of rice, but exquisitely formed, like a miniature, intricate seed. I picked it up, my fingers brushing against its cool, smooth surface. It pulsed gently in my palm, a living jewel. Where had it come from? I'd never seen anything like it. It was alien, yet strangely compelling. A warmth spread from where it rested in my hand, not unpleasant, but profound, as if something ancient had just awakened. Closer. I stared at the spore, the green glow reflecting in my eyes. My mind, usually so resistant to anything outside the realm of logic, felt strangely pliable. There was a sudden, undeniable urge, a deep-seated craving to bring it closer, to understand its secret. It wasn't curiosity. It was something far more primal, a pull that resonated with the forgotten corners of my own being. The humming of the laundry machines faded into the background, replaced by the insistent thrum of the spore. The walls of the laundry room, once a bastion of normalcy, seemed to press in, the air growing heavy, charged with an invisible energy. I lifted the spore, bringing it closer to my face, drawn by its hypnotic glow. A tendril, impossibly thin and green, seemed to sprout from its surface, reaching towards me. It was only an inch long, delicate as spun glass, but it moved with an intelligent grace. This wasn't a hallucination. This was real. A wave of nausea washed over me, a sickening lurch in my stomach. What was happening? My mind screamed at me to drop it, to crush it, to run from this unnatural thing. But my fingers wouldn't obey. They held it fast, almost reverently. The compulsion was too strong, a tide pulling me deeper into uncharted waters. The manor wasn't just influencing my dreams anymore. It was reaching out, directly, into my waking world. And I was holding its emissary. The line between what was real and what was a product of my increasingly frayed mind blurred into an indistinguishable haze. The green luminescence of the spore pulsed, a silent, hypnotic beat. My fingers twitched, an involuntary reach I almost didn't recognize as my own. It wasn't curiosity driving me now. It was a deeper, more primal draw, a craving that felt alien and yet undeniably mine. The air around it felt thick, almost syrupy, and I could swear I heard a faint, almost imperceptible hum emanating from the strange growth. It wasn't the hum of electricity, or even an insect. It was something biological. A cold shiver, born of something other than the chill of the manor, finally broke the spell. My hand, which had been inching forward, snapped back. No, not yet. I wasn't ready to touch it, to let whatever held this place in its grip take hold of me. Not like that. Not without understanding. I retreated, leaving the glowing specimen to its silent vigil in the forgotten corner. I needed more of her words, more of her truth, however twisted it might be. I found them tucked away in the sprawling, dust-laden library, not in a grand display, but behind a loose panel in a mahogany bookshelf, almost as if Elara herself had tried to hide them, even from her own gaze. 3 more leather-bound journals, identical to the first, waited. Their weight in my hands felt substantial, foreboding. I carried them to the laundry room with humming machines, seeking the mundane thrum of the appliances as an anchor against the rising tide of dread. The rhythmic churn of the washer, the low rumble of the dryer, offered a strange, almost comforting counterpoint to the unsettling revelations I knew awaited me. Elara's handwriting, once so precise, had begun to fray, the loops and slants more erratic. The early entries in this new volume were still recognizably her, detailing her botanical observations with a meticulous hand. She spoke of the unique bioluminescence of certain fungi, the unusual resilience of the manor's indigenous flora. But then the shift began. Not wind, not trick of the light. They are conversations. The root system, it speaks. It longs for understanding. It longs for connection. With what? With her? The entries grew shorter, more abstract, punctuated by hurried sketches of tendrils reaching, intertwining, forming patterns I couldn't quite decipher. There were no more Latin names, no detailed scientific classifications, only impressions, feelings, and a growing sense of urgency. November 3rd, 1978. It hungers, the manor itself, not for sunlight, not for water. It hungers for sustenance, for energy. I have felt it, this deep, resonating need. It asks, and I must provide. My stomach clenched. Provide what? I flipped pages, my fingers growing numb. November 19th, 1978. The offerings are accepted. The growth, it flourishes. It rewards me with visions, with knowledge. It shows me the true nature of life, the interconnectedness. We are all part of the same grand design. The garden is not merely a collection of plants. It is a consciousness, vast and ancient. It is aware. My gaze darted around the laundry room, suddenly hyper-aware of the faint, earthy scent that seemed to cling to the very air in Blackwood Manor. The concrete walls, the metal appliances, they felt thin, fragile barriers against something immense and unseen that permeated the house. December 7th, 1978. They speak of a new cycle, a new host. The manor requires renewal, a fresh conduit. I have done my part. I have nurtured the root, prepared the vessel. Soon the new growth will emerge. It will be glorious. My hands trembled, the leather-bound journal almost slipping from my grasp. A new host? Elara wasn't just tending a garden. He was cultivating something else entirely. Something that lived, that thought, that demanded. The hum of the machines in the laundry room seemed to deepen, to take on a more resonant quality, as if the very walls were absorbing the sound, making it part of their own low, constant thrum. I looked down at the journal, at Elara's increasingly frantic script. Her madness wasn't just a descent. It was an ascent into a terrifying new understanding, a communion with something ancient and malevolent that had taken root deep beneath Blackwood Manor. And now, it was awake. And it was waiting for me. My hands still trembled, the leather-bound journal a heavy, unsettling weight in my grasp. A new host? A new conduit? The words echoed, a cold, sharp realization now firmly lodged in my mind. Something that lived, that breathed, that seemed to permeate the very stone and timber of Blackwood Manor. I stood in the laundry room with humming machines, the rhythmic thrum a dull counterpoint to the frantic beat in my chest. It was the same smell that sometimes drifted from the deepest corners of the sprawling gardens. The places Elara had walled off, the places I had instinctively avoided. I flipped through the journal pages, my fingers tracing the elegant yet increasingly erratic script. Elara's later entries were less scientific observation and more feverish confession, a descent into something I couldn't quite comprehend. Then a drawing. Not of a plant, not really. It was a schematic, crude but precise, of a section of the manor's foundations. A small X marked a spot, accompanied by a single cryptic phrase. Where the cleansing hums, the heart finds its root. The laundry room, the humming machines. My gaze swept the damp stone walls, the industrial-grade washers and dryers, the deep porcelain sinks. No obvious doors, no secret panels. I ran my hands along the cold, rough surface of the wall where the diagram indicated, feeling for a seam, a loose stone. Nothing. Then I noticed it. Not on the wall itself, but beneath one of the massive washing machines, almost entirely obscured by its bulk and the thick, dust-laden grime. A thin, almost invisible line where the floor met the wall. A hairline fracture in the concrete that seemed too straight, too deliberate. I knelt, scraping away years of accumulated filth with my fingernail, and uncovered a small, rusty metal loop, flush with the floor. This wasn't just a crack. It was a hinge. With a grunt, I braced myself against the washing machine and pulled. The loop was stiff, caked with rust, but it gave with a groan, a sound that seemed to echo the manor's own ancient protest. The air grew heavier, thick and humid, pressing in on me. Hesitation warred with an almost desperate need for answers. What was Elara hiding down here? What was the heart? Taking a deep breath, I started down. The humming of the laundry machines faded, replaced by a new symphony of sounds. the rhythmic drip of water, the faint scuttling of unseen things, and a low, persistent thrumming that vibrated through the very stone beneath my feet. The passage narrowed, the walls closing in, their surface no longer just rough stone but covered in a strange, velvety moss that seemed to pulse faintly in the lantern's beam. Tendrils, thick as my wrist, snaked across the floor and ceiling, their texture like damp, decaying wood, but their movement subtle, almost imperceptible, as if they were slowly, steadily growing. I continued my descent, the thrumming growing louder, more insistent, vibrating not just through the floor but through my bones. The temperature steadily rose, becoming stiflingly warm, almost tropical. Finally, the passage opened into a vast, cavernous space. My lantern beam danced across an unbelievable sight, and I stopped dead, the air leaving my lungs in a ragged gasp. This wasn't a basement. This wasn't a cellar. It was a living cathedral of organic matter. Thick, gnarled roots, some as wide as tree trunks, formed an intricate, pulsating network that filled the chamber, stretching from floor to ceiling, intertwining like grotesque, living columns. A slow, deliberate expansion and contraction, a rhythmic flex that sent shivers down my spine. Between the roots, enormous fungal growths bloomed in a riot of unearthly colors. Pale whites, sickly yellows, deep purples. Some like vast fleshy shelves, others like pulsating sacs that seemed to weep a viscous, clear fluid. The thrumming was deafening here, a low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from every surface, every living fiber of this place. The air was heavy, hot and wet, thick with the scent of decay and something else, something vital and raw, like freshly turned earth mixed with blood. It was a smell that spoke of immense ancient life and profound unnatural hunger. My gaze followed the colossal roots upwards. They didn't just support the manor. They were the manor. They had consumed it, grown through it, made it their own. A new conduit? I wasn't just in a hidden passage. I was inside something alive, and I was breathing its breath. The air I was breathing in that hidden passage wasn't just old. It felt processed, filtered through something wet and ancient, carrying a subtle, earthy tang that prickled the back of my throat. The low thrumming wasn't the house settling. It was a pulse, slow and heavy, vibrating through the very bones of the structure. I wasn't just in a hidden passage. I was inside something alive, and I was breathing its breath. A wave of nausea hit me, a sudden dizzying lurch that sent my head spinning. The walls seemed to ripple, the shadows deepening and stretching like elastic. I stumbled back, my hands scraping against something slick and cold. Panic, sharp and metallic, flooded my mouth. I needed out. Now. I scrambled, fumbling for the hidden latch, my fingers clumsy and unresponsive. Then, just as the suffocating sensation threatened to swallow me whole, my hand found the release. A soft click, and the section of wall swung inward, revealing the familiar, if still unsettling, dimness of the manor's main hall. I burst out, gasping, my lungs burning as if I'd been underwater. My boots hit the polished floorboards with a jarring thud. The hall looked the same. The peeling wallpaper, the dust motes dancing in the faint light from a distant window. But it felt wrong, tainted, as if the passage had bled into the rest of the house. It wasn't coming from the passage. It was coming from everywhere. My legs felt heavy, uncooperative. The laundry room, its humming machines, its sterile detergents, its simple purpose. That's where I headed, stumbling more than walking, my vision swimming at the edges. When I finally reached the laundry room with humming machines, the sound was a jarring comfort. The rhythmic whir and tumble of the old appliances, the faint scent of bleach and stale fabric softener, were a balm to my frayed nerves. Alone. Always. Her fault. The words were indistinct, fragments, yet they clawed at something raw inside me. My past, the accident, the loss. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push it back, but the images came unbidden. The rain-slicked road, the sudden glare of headlights, the sickening crunch of metal. But this time, it was different. The rain wasn't just water, it was thick, viscous, like sap. The headlights weren't just bright, they pulsed with a sickly green glow like the bioluminescent fungus I'd seen in the manor's depths. And the face of my loved one, contorted in that final, terrifying moment, began to sprout tendrils, delicate green filaments unfurling from their eyes, their mouth. I pushed off the machine, stumbling backwards. Not real. But the vision persisted, overlaying the mundane reality of the laundry room. The clothes spinning in the dryer weren't just fabric. They were writhing masses of root-like strands, tangling, knotting. I felt a strange understanding bloom in my mind, a terrifying clarity. And now, it was reaching for me. The root, that monstrous hidden intelligence, wasn't just in the manor, it was the manor. And it was attempting to graft itself onto my very consciousness. My mind raced, disjointed thoughts colliding. The strange growths, the breathing passages, the way the house seemed to shift and change around me. She hadn't been cultivating plants. He had been cultivating it. And her death, was it a liberation or simply a transition? A handoff? It was a terrible, seductive invitation, promising understanding, belonging, an end to the gnawing grief that had plagued me. But the price was me. My identity, my sanity, my very essence. I pressed my hands against my temples, trying to physically hold my fragmented thoughts together. It wanted me. It needed me. And a horrifying part of me, weary and broken, felt a terrible, undeniable pull to simply let go. The cold, unyielding grip that had settled over me was no metaphor. It was real, a physical sensation, a deep-seated ache that wasn't in my bones, but beyond them, in the very marrow of my being. The thought was a sickening jolt, a current running through me, but it also ignited something else, a desperate, burning rage. This wasn't some slow-acting poison. This was a war for my very self. I wouldn't let it happen. I wouldn't become another root in this monstrous system. My breath hitched, a ragged sound in the suffocating silence of the hall. The air itself felt thick, laden with the scent of damp earth and something acrid, like old blood mixed with ozone. My focus narrowed. The conservatory, that sprawling, glass-domed heart of Elara's peculiar obsession. If this thing was a root system, then the conservatory was its central taproot, its primary conduit to the world above and to Elara's. Experiments. It had to be where I could strike, where I could sever whatever twisted connection was trying to graft itself onto my soul. I stumbled towards the grand staircase, my legs feeling heavy, as if weighted with lead. Each step echoed unnaturally, the old wood groaning under my weight, not with the sound of age, but with something more deliberate, a low, drawn-out complaint. The portraits lining the walls seemed to watch me, their painted eyes following my every move, their expressions shifting in the dim light. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. Illusions. Just the manor playing tricks. It wanted me to stop, to give in. I wouldn't. The grand hall, usually a place of echoing space, felt compressed, the ceiling pressing down, the walls leaning inward. I could hear it now, a low thrumming that vibrated through the floorboards, a sound like a giant sluggish heart beating deep within the earth. It wasn't just the house groaning anymore. It was breathing. The thrumming intensified here, joined by a rhythmic, mechanical hum. The door to the laundry room was ajar, and the steady, monotonous drone of industrial-sized washers and dryers was surprisingly loud, a mundane cacophony that warred with the primal thrum of the manor. For a split second, The sheer normalcy of it, the scent of stale detergent, the mundane whirring was jarring, a brief disorienting anchor in the rising tide of unreality. I considered ducking in, just for a moment of respite, but the urgency of my mission pulled me forward. I couldn't waste time. As I passed the laundry room, a deep, guttural groan erupted from behind the wall, right beside my ear. It wasn't a structural sound. It was organic, resonant, like something massive clearing its throat. The floor beneath my feet lurched, sending me sprawling. My head hit the cold stone with a sickening crack, and for a moment, stars swam in my vision. A sharp, metallic tang filled my mouth. I tasted blood. The corridor was twisting. Or was I? I staggered onward, the door to the conservatory now visible, a hazy rectangle of light at the end of the shifting corridor. But something was blocking it. They were pulsing too, in sync with the manor's heartbeat and adorned with grotesque, bell-shaped flowers that oozed a viscous amber sap. This wasn't just old growth. This was active, aggressive resistance. It knew what I was trying to do. It was fighting back. I had to get through. I spotted an old, rusted iron pipe lying discarded in a corner, probably from some long-forgotten repair. I swung the pipe, bringing it down with all my might against the thickest vine. The impact was sickening. The vine recoiled, then lashed out, a whip-like tendril wrapping around my ankle. I cried out, losing my balance, and crashed to the floor again, the pipe clattering away. The vine tightened, digging into my flesh, a sharp, burning pain. More tendrils erupted from the wall, snaking towards me, their tips probing, curious, like blind serpents. One brushed my cheek, its surface rough and damp, leaving a trail of the sickly sap. The smell intensified, cloying, suffocating. My vision blurred, not from the blow to my head, but from a sudden, profound drowsiness that threatened to drag me under. The manor was trying to put me to sleep, to absorb me. I thrashed, kicking out, trying to dislodge the vine from my ankle. It held fast, inexorable. My breath came in ragged gasps. The walls around me seemed to writhe, the patterns on the wallpaper morphing into distorted, leering faces, their mouths open in silent screams. Another vine, thicker than my arm, shot out from the floor, coiling around my chest, pinning my arms to my sides. I was trapped. The bell-shaped flowers, now closer, began to quiver, and from their open mouths, a fine, almost invisible mist began to drift, sweet and cloying, straight into my face. My eyelids grew heavy. The rage that had fueled me began to ebb, replaced by a growing lethargy, a strange, profound peace. This was it. This was how Elara had gone. Not a struggle, but a slow, sweet surrender. No. A single, primal spark of defiance flared in my gut. I wouldn't surrender. Not like this. Not to this. With a roar that tore through my throat, I strained against the vine, feeling a searing pain as it dug deeper into my flesh. I wouldn't. I couldn't. But the mist was intoxicating, numbing. Hadn't just inherited this place. He had become it. Elara hadn't fought this thing, not in the end. She'd welcomed it, tended it, cultivated it. He was its willing gardener, and now I was the next seed. Fear, yes, but also a stubborn, defiant anger. I wasn't Elara. I wouldn't surrender to this slow, insidious consumption. There had to be an answer, a way out that she, in her twisted devotion, had either overlooked or actively avoided. The creeping tendrils that laced the walls felt more vibrant, their subtle pulses almost audible. I ran my hands over the spines of her botanical texts, the leather covers slick with a faint, unseen moisture. I checked the desk drawers, the hidden compartments I'd found before, but they yielded nothing new. Only the familiar, unsettling scrawl of her earlier observations, charting the growth, the awareness of the manor. I paused, breathing in the dense, earthy air. Where would she hide something truly damning? Something she didn't want even herself to easily find. Or perhaps something she wanted to be found only when the time was right. I'd seen her poke at the ashes sometimes, a strange, almost ritualistic gesture. Nothing. Just soot and the faint smell of long-dead fires. But then, my fingers brushed against a loose stone in the back wall of the fireplace. A small, almost imperceptible seam. I pressed. It gave way with a soft click, revealing a shallow recess. Inside, nestled amongst dried, brittle leaves that crumbled at my touch, was a single, leather-bound journal. Smaller than the others, its cover was unadorned, almost stark. This was it. I could feel it. The truth, ugly and raw, waited within. My hands trembled as I pulled it free. I needed to read this, but not here. Not in the study, where the manor's influence felt strongest, where Elara's presence still clung like a shroud. My feet carried me down the winding servants' stairs, past the kitchens, and into the basement. The air here was damp, heavy, but there was a steady thrumming sound, a mechanical rhythm that, for a moment, was a balm. I pushed open the heavy wooden door to the laundry room with humming machines. The washing machine churned, a low, rhythmic slosh, and the dryer spun with a soft, persistent rumble. The scent of detergent, faint but present, was a strange comfort amidst the pervasive damp earthiness of the manor. I pulled up a rickety wooden stool, the only furniture in the room, and sat, placing the journal on my lap. I opened the journal. The pages were thin, almost translucent, and the ink was faded in places. Elara's elegant script now wavering, sometimes dissolving into frantic, almost illegible scribbles. The entries were dated months after her initial discoveries, after the manor had begun to truly assert itself. The root. It speaks not in words, but in sensations, in echoes through the stone and soil. It craves a deeper connection. My early attempts to merely observe were foolish. One cannot simply watch a storm. One must weather it, or be swept away. My breath hitched. She wasn't just observing. He was participating. It has shown me its hunger. Not for flesh, not for blood, but for consciousness, for a mind to intertwine with its vast, intricate network. It seeks not to destroy, but to absorb, to expand. A symbiotic joining, a new bloom. I swallowed, the words tasting like ash. That was the ritual. The integration is profound. My own will, it recedes, replaced by something ancient, something vast. I am no longer Elara, not entirely. I am a conduit, a vessel, and the manor. And then the final entry, scrawled across a full 2 pages, the ink bleeding through the thin paper. The choice is simple for those who truly understand. Resist and be consumed slowly, painfully, your essence scattered like dust. Or embrace and become one. Offer your consciousness, your very being, to the root. Become a node in its glorious expansion. It is not death, but a transformation. A sacrifice for a greater, grander existence. A new gardener for a new age. The ritual requires willingness, a conscious merging. The blood of the host, mingled with the sap of the root, at the heart of the deepest growth. Then, simply, yield. My fingers clenched around the journal, the leather creaking under the pressure. She hadn't been trapped. He had chosen her fate. And now, the manor, Elara's legacy, was demanding the same from me. It wasn't just the machines anymore. It was the manor itself, a vast, hungry entity, echoing the words I just read, pressing its demand into my mind. Yield. I felt it then, a subtle shift in the air, a thickening, a pressure against my temples. The faint, earthy smell intensified, growing richer, almost sweet, like decaying blossoms. The choice was clear, terrifyingly so. Succumb, become another node in this sprawling, sentient horror, and lose myself entirely. Or find a final, desperate means of escape, knowing that the manor, once awakened, would not easily let its new host go. Elara had made her choice. I would make mine. I wasn't going to yield, not yet. The question wasn't if I could escape, but how, and what I would have to sacrifice to do it. The pressure intensified, a tangible weight on my skull, pressing behind my eyes. The air, thick with that cloying, sweet decay, felt like liquid, filling my lungs with something heavy and vital, yet utterly wrong. It wasn't just a smell anymore. It was a taste, a texture on my tongue, a living thing trying to force its way inside me. My mind reeled, assaulted by a chorus of whispers that weren't words but raw impulses. Yield, join, grow, feed. I felt myself swaying, my knees threatening to buckle. The choice, as the entity presented it, wasn't a question of survival, but of the form my existence would take. Become another node, another root-bound consciousness in this vast, sprawling horror, or what? Fight? How do you fight something that is the very fabric of the house, that breathes through its walls and pulses through its floors? A flicker of defiance, cold and sharp, cut through the haze. Elara, my great-aunt, who had succumbed, who had become part of this. I wouldn't let her sacrifice be for nothing. I wouldn't become another silent hum in its endless subterranean choir. I had to try. My legs, heavy as lead, moved. The entity didn't want me to leave the manor. It wanted me to become the manor. It wanted a new caretaker, a conscious mind to guide its silent growth, to tend its gruesome gardens. I stumbled down the familiar yet now alien staircase. Each step was a battle, my muscles protesting, my mind a war zone. My destination was vague, driven by a desperate primal instinct. Something about the constant rhythmic noise, the hum of machinery had always felt separate. A tiny pocket of human order in this organic chaos. I found myself pushing open the heavy door to the laundry room with humming machines. The roar of the industrial washers and dryers was deafening, a mechanical symphony that seemed to push back against the psychic pressure in my head. I leaned against a massive dryer, its metal skin vibrating with furious energy. My hands, trembling, gripped the rough surface. This was it, my final stand. But what could I do? Then I saw it. It pulsed faintly, a living vein, a direct line from the entity's heart to the very source of this room's defiance. This wasn't just a plant. It was a vast, networked intelligence. He was its eyes, its hands, its conscious will in the physical world. And it was hungry for another. It was hungry for me. The root twitched, sensing my focus. You will tend. You will grow. My eyes fell on a heavy wrench lying on a nearby workbench, forgotten by some long-dead groundskeeper. A tool of destruction, or at least disruption. If this root was its connection, its sensory input, its vulnerable point. I seized the wrench. I raised it, the sheer absurdity of the act almost making me laugh, a hysterical bark that died in my throat. I was going to fight a sentient house with a wrench. With a guttural cry, I brought the wrench down, aiming for the thickest part of the root where it emerged from the floor. The impact was jarring, a sickening crunch that resonated up my arm. The house screamed. Not a sound, but a psychic shriek that tore through the mechanical roar of the laundry room, through the very bone of my skull. It was a soundless, agonizing roar of pain and fury. The lights flickered wildly. The humming machines groaned, their movements becoming erratic. A washer door flew open, spewing hot, soapy water across the floor. I hit it again and again, a mindless, desperate frenzy. Each blow was met with another wave of psychic agony. a searing pain behind my eyes that threatened to split my head open. I saw images flash before me. Vast subterranean caverns filled with pulsing organic matter, tendrils reaching into the very bedrock of the earth, an endless, silent network. He was still there, within the root, a prisoner, an unwilling participant. And she wasn't alone. The entity fought back, not with physical force, but with an overwhelming surge of mental coercion. My limbs grew heavy, my resolve wavered. The wrench slipped from my grasp, clattering to the wet floor. My vision blurred, the laundry room twisting and warping, the walls seeming to breathe, to close in. The sweet, earthy smell returned with a vengeance, thick and suffocating. I fell to my knees, gasping, my body racked with tremors. I had heard it, but not enough. It was too vast, too ancient, too deeply entwined with the very earth. The entity wasn't just in the manor. It was the manor. And it had found its new caretaker. My great-aunt Elara and those before her hadn't been defeated. They had been integrated. Their minds, their knowledge, their very essence now served the root. And now so would mine. A tendril, thin as a thread but impossibly strong, snaked up from the broken root, brushing against my cheek. I felt it connect, not to my skin, but to something deeper, something within my mind. A sense of vastness, of immense patient power, flowed into me, through me, around me. My own thoughts, my memories, my very identity began to fray at the edges, dissolving into a larger collective consciousness. I screamed, but no sound escaped my lips. My body spasmed, then went still. My eyes, wide and unfocused, stared at the humming machines, at the mundane reality of the laundry room that was now my prison. I was here, yet I was everywhere. I was Blake, but I was also Elara. I was the house, the roots, the soil, the endless hungry growth. The manor hummed, satisfied, its new caretaker finally in place, and it waited, patiently, for its next inheritor. It always did.